My name is Ezra, and if you were to ask me how my life is going, I wouldn't know where to begin. I suppose the simplest way to describe it is this. It's not where I thought it would be. I'm 34, a single father, and I've just returned to the town I swore I'd escape forever. A place that clings to me like a shadow I can't shake. I don't despise this town, but its memories are a heavy burden, and not all of them are kind. My son, Theo, and I are now living next door to my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Harrow, in the old house where I grew up. It's small, cramped, its walls whispering echoes of the past, but it's enough for the two of us. For now. Theo is the only thing in my life that still feels pure. The only light in this suffocating darkness. He's 5, with an energy that could ignite the stars, and he's inseparable from his stuffed clownfish, a tattered, faded thing he calls Big Fin because of its oversized fins. It's a relic now, threadbare and worn, but he clings to it like a lifeline, whispering to it as if it's his only friend in this forsaken place. Sometimes I catch him murmuring secrets to Big Fin, his voice soft and conspiratorial. And it's the sweetest yet most haunting thing I've ever seen. Children have a way of finding joy in the smallest things, don't they? I wish I could still do that. I wasn't always this hollow, quiet, weary, and frayed at the edges. Back in high school, people said I had it all figured out. Good grades, a spot on the football team, and even the heart of Lydia, the most beautiful girl in town. I thought life was a radiant promise, waiting for me to claim it. But that was a lifetime ago. Lydia's gone now. Cancer stole her 2 years ago, leaving a void that nothing can fill. I'm just trying to keep moving forward, but it's hard. 6 months ago, I lost my job, a modest warehouse gig that kept the bills paid. It wasn't much, but it was steady. Then the layoffs came, and I was the first to go. That's when the weight of the world began to crush me. My savings vanished faster than I expected, and the bills piled up like a storm cloud over my head. I tried to shield Theo from the worst of it, but you can't hide everything from a child. He's sharp, just like his mother. He senses when something's wrong even if he doesn't speak of it. Moving back here wasn't my first choice. My relationship with my parents is complicated. They're decent people, I suppose, but they have a way of making me feel diminished. My father, Mr. Harrow, is the kind of man who believes a man should claw his way up no matter the odds. And my mother, Mrs. Harrow, is kind but overbearing, always fussing as if I'm still a child. Not a grown man with a son of my own. I don't drink around Theo. I swore I'd never let him see that side of me. But once he's tucked into bed, I'll pour myself a glass or two in the dead of night. It dulls the sharp edges of my thoughts, you know. I'm not proud of it, but it helps. Or so I tell myself. I keep the bottles hidden in the garage, stashed behind a box of rusted tools, out of sight, out of mind, as if that makes it less real. Those first few weeks back in town were suffocating. The house reeked of decay, as if it had been sealed shut for decades, even though my parents claimed they kept it clean. I spent those initial nights lying awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, the house groaning and creaking around me like a living thing. It was unnerving to be back in my childhood bedroom, especially with Theo sleeping in the room next door. He didn't seem to mind, though. To him, it was all a grand, thrilling adventure. Small towns have a way of suffocating you with their familiarity. I couldn't step into the grocery store without running into someone from my past. They'd ask the same questions. Is that you, Ezra? What brings you back? I give the same hollow answers. I'm doing fine, just needed a fresh start. No one pressed too hard, but I could see the pity in their eyes. A silent judgment that stung more than words. I spent a lot of time fixing up the house. It gave me something to focus on, kept my hands busy. The roof needed patching. The kitchen sink leaked like a slow, dripping curse. And the front door sagged in the middle, groaning with every push. My father came over a few times to help, but mostly he just stood there, offering unsolicited advice while I worked. I bit my tongue and nodded. Knowing it wasn't worth the fight, I'll tell you this. Life is not easy, but I'm trying. Every day, I wake up and remind myself why I'm doing this. For Theo, for his future. He deserves a good life, better than the one I've been able to give him so far. I don't know what awaits us here, but I'm hoping it's something better. Something worth staying for. For now. That has to be enough. I'm trying to make it enough to make it. Life in town offered few opportunities, but I did my best. I drove around, filling out applications at every place with a help wanted sign in the window. Grocery stores, hardware shops, even the diner where I used to take Lydia on dates. It didn't matter. I just needed something steady, something to keep the lights on and food on the table. But no one was hiring, at least not full-time. It's just slow right now, they'd say. Try again in a month or two. A month or two felt like an eternity when the bills were piling up like a noose tightening around my neck. I didn't have the luxury of waiting. That's when I started picking up odd jobs. A neighbor needed his gutters cleaned. A man across town had a lawnmower that wouldn't start. Someone else wanted help moving furniture into storage. The work wasn't steady, and it was never enough. But it was something. Every morning, I'd check the community bulletin board at the coffee shop or ask around to see if anyone needed help. Some days I'd get lucky and find a few hours of work. Other days I'd come up empty, spending the afternoon drowning in worry about how I'd make ends meet. The hardest part wasn't the work, it was leaving Theo behind. I hated the thought of him being alone, but I had no choice. My parents lived right next door, and my mother was eager to watch him. Most of the time, she'd park herself in the recliner in the living room, turn on the Golden Girls, and doze off halfway through an episode. "Don't worry about a thing, Ezra," she'd say. "I'll take good care of him." And she did, in her own way. Theo didn't seem to mind. He'd sit on the floor with Big Finn, building towers out of blocks or coloring pictures in one of his books. Sometimes he'd peek into the living room to see if Grandma was still awake. But most of the time, he kept himself entertained. For a while, everything seemed fine. I was keeping busy, and the money trickled in, just enough to keep us afloat. The house felt less oppressive, too. I fixed the leaky sink, the squeaky floorboards, the stuck cabinet doors. It wasn't perfect, but it was starting to feel like a home again. Then, one morning I noticed a small patch of dark mold on the kitchen wall, right by the baseboard, no bigger than my hand. It looked wrong, unnatural, like a stain that had seeped through from the other side of reality. I figured it must have come from a leak, maybe in the plumbing behind the wall. I made a mental note to check it out later. But with a job lined up that day, I didn't have time to deal with it right then. When I got home that evening, the mold patch had grown, its edges creeping outward like a living thing. I frowned, crouching down to get a closer look. It was strange. It didn't feel damp or slimy, just dark, as if it had soaked into the paint, staining the house's very soul. I grabbed a sponge and some cleaner, scrubbing at it with all my strength.
but it wouldn't budge. I told myself I'd deal with it over the weekend when I had more time. A few days later, another patch of mold appeared. This time in the hallway, far from any plumbing, which made no sense at all. I tried not to let it bother me, but it was hard to ignore. The house was old, sure, but this kind of thing hadn't been a problem before. I told my father about it, hoping he'd have some advice. It's probably just the weather, he said dismissively. These old houses hold on to moisture, you know. Might want to check the roof, though. Could be a leak. The roof was the last thing I wanted to deal with, but I nodded and said I'd take a look. Meanwhile, the patches kept spreading, slowly but relentlessly. I'd find them in corners, behind furniture, even on the bathroom ceiling, their dark tendrils reaching out like fingers. It wasn't just the house that was changing. Theo started acting different. He was still his cheerful self most of the time, but he began talking about someone he called the Hollow Man. The Hollow Man said Big Finn needs a bath, he announced one afternoon while I was fixing a wobbly chair. The Hollow Man? I asked, glancing up from my work, a chill creeping up my spine. He's my new friend, Theo said matter-of-factly. He lives in the walls. I forced a smile, though my stomach twisted. Oh, yeah? What does the Hollow Man look like? Theo shrugged. I don't know. He doesn't come out, he just talks to me when I'm playing. I chuckled, but it felt hollow, unnatural. Kids and their imaginations, right? Still, something about it made me uneasy. The way he spoke, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. The Hollow Man doesn't bother Grandma, Theo added. He only talks to me. I ruffled his hair, trying to brush it off. Well, tell the Hollow Man to be nice, okay? Okay, Daddy, he said with a grin. And just like that, the conversation was over.
Not long after, things began to shift. Against all odds, I landed a steady job. Nothing glamorous, just stocking shelves at the local hardware store. But it was a paycheck. More than I'd had in months. The hours were long, and the pay wasn't great, but it felt good to have somewhere to go every day. To feel normal, like I was clawing my way back to stability. The downside was I wasn't home as much. Most days I didn't get off until late in the evening. I'd come back to find my mother snoozing in the recliner, the TV humming quietly in the background. She and Theo had their little routine. They'd bake something in the afternoon, usually a pie or cookies, and she'd let him eat as many as he wanted. There was always a half-eaten pie on the counter when I got home, crumbs scattered everywhere, and Theo waiting up to tell me about his day. He was always excited, bubbling over with stories about his imaginary friend, the Hollow Man. The Hollow Man says there's a secret room under the stairs, Theo said one night, his eyes shining as he clutched Big Finn. I ruffled his hair. A secret room, huh? Did you find it? No, but the Hollow Man says it's there, he replied. He told me about it when Grandma fell asleep. He says he knows a lot of things. I smiled, trying to play along. Oh, yeah? What else does he know? He knows about the kids who used to live here, Theo began. There were 3 of them, a boy named Charlie, a girl named Rosie, and another boy. But the Hollow Man says I'm not supposed to say his name. I froze for a moment. Charlie and Rosie, huh? Did Grandma tell you about them? Theo shook his head. No, the Hollow Man told me. Charlie had a red wagon, and Rosie liked to draw pictures of flowers. She didn't like pink, though. She liked purple. It was the kind of detail that made me pause. Theo was creative, sure, but the things he described felt too specific,
Too real for a 5-year-old who'd never heard any stories about this house before. Still, I brushed it off. Kids have wild imaginations, I told myself. Probably just a mix of things he'd overheard and some things he'd made up. "All right, Theo," I said, kissing the top of his head. "Time for bed, buddy." He pouted but didn't argue. "Night, Daddy. Night, Big Finn." The days turned into weeks, and life settled into a fragile routine. I'd wake up early, get Theo fed and dressed, then head off to work. My mother would come over in the afternoons, and they'd bake or play games until I got home. Theo seemed happy, and for a while so was I. But little things started happening around the house. Things I couldn't ignore. The mole patches reappeared, creeping along the living room wall like dark, creeping vines, just like the ones I'd scrubbed off in the kitchen and hallway. I cleaned them as best I could, but within days they were back. Then more spots showed up, spreading along the baseboards and up toward the ceiling. Probably just the humidity, I muttered to myself, though deep down I wasn't so sure. Theo, meanwhile, was talking to the walls more often. I'd catch him in his room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, whispering to no one in particular. "What are you doing, bud?" I asked one evening. "I'm talking to the Hollow Man," he said without looking up. "He says the walls are full of old things." "Old things, huh? Like what?" "Bones," he said matter-of-factly. "He says animals used to live in here, and now their bones are still hiding." I laughed nervously. "That's interesting, Theo. But you know there aren't any bones in the walls, right?" He shrugged. "The Hollow Man says there are. I didn't think much of it at first. Kids say strange things all the time." But a few days later, I opened the cabinet under the kitchen sink and froze. Tucked in the corner, behind a stack of cleaning supplies, was a small pile of bones. Bleached white and brittle, as if they'd been there for decades. I stared at them, my heart pounding. "Theo!" I called. He came running, Big Finn dangling from his hand. "Yeah, Daddy?" "Did you put these here?" I asked, my voice trembling. He frowned. "Number, the Hollow Man says he doesn't need them anymore." My mouth went dry. "Theo, we've talked about making up stories, haven't we? These aren't toys, don't touch them, okay?" He nodded solemnly. "Okay, Daddy." I gathered the bones in an old rag and threw them out in the garbage can outside, telling myself they were probably just leftovers from some animal that had gotten into the house years ago. Still, the whole thing left me feeling unsettled. Over the next week, I found more bones. Always in odd places. Stuffed in the corner of a coat closet, hidden inside an old shoebox in the basement. Even tucked into one of my boots. Each time I'd throw them out, telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe they'd been here all along, and I was just now noticing them because the house was old and falling apart. But it was hard to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong.
The mole patches kept growing, spreading across the living room walls like a dark, creeping plague. No matter how much I scrubbed, they always came back. And Theo, he kept talking about the Hollow Man. He'd tell me about their conversations, about the secret places in the house, about the kids who used to live here. "The Hollow Man says Rosie's flowers are still here," he said one night while I was tucking them in. I frowned. "What flowers, buddy?" "The ones she drew," he replied. "The Hollow Man says they're hiding under the floor." I forced a smile. "All right, that's enough stories for tonight, okay? Time to get some sleep." "Okay, Daddy," he said, yawning. "Good night." I closed his door softly, but the uneasy feeling that had been gnawing at me all week didn't fade. I tried to push it aside, telling myself I was just tired, but no matter how much I wanted to believe that, this house had a way of reminding me that something was not right. The mold was the worst of it. What had started as small patches had grown into something I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just creeping along the walls anymore. It was almost taking shape. One morning, I walked into the living room and froze. The mold had formed what looked like a man's outline, tall and thin, with arms stretching down to his sides. It wasn't clear or detailed, but it was enough to make my stomach turn. Later, I muttered to myself, I'll deal with this later. But later never seemed to come. Between work and trying to keep things normal for Theo, I didn't have the time or the energy to figure out what was happening. I scrubbed at the mold with everything I had. But it always came back, and every time I turned around it seemed worse. Theo was changing too. He'd always been full of energy, bouncing around the house, chattering about Big Finn and his little adventures. But now he was quieter. He still talked about the Hollow Man, but there was something different about the way he spoke. He wasn't as excited. His words felt heavier, like they carried a weight I couldn't understand. One afternoon, I found him sitting on the floor of his room, his crayons scattered around him, rolling across the hardwood one by one. But he didn't seem to care. He was staring at the corner of the room, his head tilted slightly, as if he were listening to someone. "Theo," I said, stepping inside. "What are you doing, buddy?" He didn't look at me. "Talking to the Hollow Man." "Yeah? What's the Hollow Man saying?" Theo finally turned his head, his expression unreadable. "He doesn't like you, Daddy." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean, Theo?" "He says you don't belong here," Theo replied, his voice so matter-of-factly it made my skin crawl. "He says you're making it worse." I knelt down beside him, forcing a smile. "You know the Hollow Man isn't real, right? He's just pretend." Theo shrugged, picking up a crayon. "He doesn't like it when you say that." I didn't know what to say, so I ruffled his hair and told him it was time to wash up for dinner. As he walked past me, I glanced at the corner he'd been staring at. It was just an empty wall, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Over the next few days, the mold grew worse. The shape of the man in the living room was more distinct now. It wasn't just a vague outline anymore. It had features, a head, shoulders, arms that seemed to stretch toward the floor. And it was moving. That was it for me. Once I noticed that, I admitted something was very wrong with this house, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. "Dad," I said that evening, sitting in an old booth at a local diner. "What do you know about the house?" He looked up from his plate, frowning. "What do you mean?" "I mean, is there anything weird about it? Anything I should know?" My father leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "That house is old, Ezra. Older than you probably realize. It was built back in the 1800s, long before your grandparents bought it. Why are you asking?" There's been some strange stuff happening," I began. "Mold I can't get rid of. Theo talking about imaginary friends. You know, that kind of thing." My father's frown deepened. "Imaginary friends, huh?" "Yeah," I said. "He calls it the Hollow Man." My father rubbed a hand over his face, looking uncomfortable. "You ever hear the name Elias Varn?" I shook my head. "Number should I have?" "Maybe," he said. "Varn used to own that house. That was back in the 1930s, 40s. Folks around town, they said he wasn't right in the head. There were rumors about him. Bad ones." "What kind of rumors?" I asked.
My father hesitated, then leaned in closer, lowering his voice as if someone might overhear. People said he killed folks, travelers mostly, hobos and drifters who passed through town. Back then, nobody kept track of that kind of thing, no forensics, no internet. If someone went missing, it was just forgotten.
I stared at him, my blood running cold. And they think he buried them in the house? I asked. That's what people said, my father replied. In the walls, under the floorboards. But they couldn't prove anything. When Varn died, they didn't find any bodies, Just stories. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Why the hell didn't you tell me this? I didn't think it mattered, he said. The house has been in the family for decades. Nobody's ever had any problems with it. Until now, I thought. I got up from the table, my hand shaking. I need to go. Ezra, my father called after me. Don't go scaring yourself over old ghost stories. That house is just a house. I didn't answer him. As I drove back home, all I could think about was Theo. The mold, the bones, the things he'd been saying, and the hollow man. The drive back felt like it took forever, my father's words echoing in my head. But all I could think about was Theo. When I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. The house was too quiet. Normally, I'd see my mother through the front window snoozing in the recliner, the glow of the TV casting a warm light. But the window was dark, and there was no sign of her. I rushed inside, the door slamming behind me. Theo! I called. Mom! Where are you? No answer. My heart hammered in my chest as I moved from room to room. The living room was empty, the recliner still rocking slightly, as if someone had just gotten up. The kitchen was silent, the half-eaten pie from earlier untouched on the counter. Theo, I said again, louder this time. Panic started to creep in as I checked his bedroom. His bed was empty, the covers thrown back like he'd gotten up in a hurry. Big Finn lay on the floor, abandoned. I tore through the house, checking every corner, every closet, even the basement. He wasn't there. My mother wasn't there either. It was as if they'd vanished. And that's when I saw it. The mold. It was worse than ever, spreading across the living room wall in thick, dark patches. The shape of the man was fully formed now, his outline sharp and menacing. It felt like he was staring at me. Where's my son? I said, my voice trembling with rage. Where is he? The house seemed to creak in response, the sound low and groaning like a beast stirring in his sleep. My chest tightened as rage boiled over. I grabbed the sledgehammer from the corner, the same one I'd been using to fix up the porch, and turned back to the wall. You want to play games? Fine. I swung the sledgehammer with all my strength, and the drywall crumbled under the impact. Dust and debris filled the air as I swung again and again, the sound of breaking wood and plaster drowning out everything else. My arms ached, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Behind the wall was a crawl space I'd never known existed. It was dark and cramped, the air thick and stale, reeking of decay. I crawled inside, the flashlight from my phone casting long, eerie shadows. And then I saw him. Theo, I said. He was curled up in the corner, his little face streaked with dirt. When he saw me, his eyes lit up, and he scrambled toward me, throwing his arms around my neck. I held him tight, clutching him to my chest. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his small hands gripping my shirt. The hollow man said you wouldn't come, he whispered. I forced a smile. Let's get out of here, okay? Theo nodded, and I carried him out of the crawl space. The living room felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the weight of the house had shifted. The mole was still there, but I didn't care. I just needed to get us out. I didn't even bother packing. I grabbed a duffel bag, stuffed it with a few changes of clothes, and threw Big Fin inside. Theo clung to me the whole time, his little arms wrapped around my neck as if he were afraid to let go. I carried Theo to a neighbor's house, a friend I trusted, asking them to watch over him while I called the police and went back to the house to look for my mother. Thank God I found her quickly. She'd fallen off the back porch, telling me it felt like someone had pushed her. Her leg was badly bruised, maybe broken, and I sat with her until the police and paramedics arrived. At least she was safe. I told the police everything. I didn't know what else to do. I told them about the crawl space, the bones I'd found, and the strange things that had happened in that house. They took my statement and promised to investigate. I stared at him, my blood running cold. And they think he buried them in the house? I asked. That's what people said, my father replied. In the walls under the floorboards. But they couldn't prove anything. When Varn died, they didn't find any bodies, Just stories. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Why the hell didn't you tell me this? I didn't think it mattered, he said. The house has been in the family for decades. Nobody's ever had any problems with it. Until now, I thought. I got up from the table, my hands shaking. I need to go. Ezra, my father called after me. Don't go scaring yourself over old ghost stories. That house is just a house. I didn't answer him. As I drove back home, all I could think about was Theo. The mold, the bones, the things he'd been saying, and the hollow man. The drive back felt like it took forever. My father's words echoing in my head. But all I could think about was Theo. When I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. The house was too quiet. Normally I'd see my mother through the front window, snoozing in the recliner, the glow of the TV casting a warm light. But the window was dark, and there was no sign of her. I rushed inside, the door slamming behind me. Theo! I called. Mom, where are you? No answer. My heart hammered at my chest as I moved from room to room. The living room was empty, the recliner still rocking slightly as if someone had just gotten up. The kitchen was silent, the half-eaten pie from earlier untouched on the counter. Theo, I said again, louder this time. Panic started to creep in as I checked his bedroom. His bed was empty, the covers thrown back like he'd gotten up in a hurry. Big Fin lay on the floor, abandoned. I tore through the house, checking every corner, every closet, even the basement. He wasn't there. My mother wasn't there either. It was as if they'd vanished. That's when I saw it. The mold. It was worse than ever, spreading across the living room wall in thick, dark patches. The shape of the man was fully formed now, his outline sharp and menacing. It felt like he was staring at me. Where's my son? I said, my voice trembling with rage. Where is he? The house seemed to creak in response, the sound low and groaning, like a beast stirring in its sleep. My chest tightened as the rage boiled over. I grabbed the sledgehammer from the corner, the same one I'd been using to fix up the porch, and turned back to the wall. You want to play games? Fine. I swung the sledgehammer with all my strength, and the drywall crumbled under the impact. Dust and debris filled the air as I swung again and again, the sound of breaking wood and plaster drowning out everything else. My arms ached. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Behind the wall was a crawl space I'd never known existed. It was dark and cramped, the air thick and stale, reeking of decay. I crawled inside, the flashlight from my phone casting long, eerie shadows. And then I saw him. Theo!
I said. He was curled up in the corner, his little face streaked with dirt. When he saw me, his eyes lit up, and he scrambled toward me, throwing his arms around my neck. I held him tight, clutching him to my chest. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his small hands gripping my shirt. "The Hollow Man said you wouldn't come," he whispered. I forced a smile. "Let's get out of here, okay?" Theo nodded, and I carried him out of the crawl space. The living room felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the weight of the house had shifted. The mold was still there, but I didn't care. I just needed to get us out. I didn't even bother packing. I grabbed a duffel bag, stuffed it with a few changes of clothes, and threw Big Fin inside. Theo clung to me the whole time, his little arms wrapped around my neck, as if he were afraid to let go. I carried Theo to a neighbor's house, a friend I trusted, asking them to watch over him while I called the police and went back to the house to look for my mother. Thank God I found her quickly. She'd fallen off the back porch, telling me it felt like someone had pushed her. Her leg was badly bruised, maybe broken, and I sat with her until the police and paramedics arrived. At least she was safe. I told the police everything. I didn't know what else to do. I told them about the crawl space, the bones I'd found, and the strange things that had happened in that house. They took my statement and promised to investigate. A few weeks later, they called me back. They'd gone into the house and found dozens of bones scattered in crawl spaces and walls all over the property. They couldn't tell if they were human or animal, at least not right away. The detective I spoke with said they'd send them off for testing and update me as soon as they knew more. But the update never came. I called a few times, but they always said the same thing. The investigation's ongoing. Months passed, and life started to feel normal again. We never went back to that house. I finally saved up enough to rent a small apartment. It wasn't much, just a 2-bedroom unit in an older complex. But it was ours. Theo was thrilled when I told him we were moving, and we spent days packing up our things at Uncle Dan's, making sure not to forget Big Fin. The new place felt like a fresh start. The walls were clean, the carpet was new, and there was no mold to scrub away. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we could breathe. Theo adjusted quickly, making the space his own. He decorated his room with drawings and hung up a poster of sea creatures I found at a thrift store. Big Fin had his usual spot on the bed, propped against the pillow like a king. One evening, a few weeks after we moved in, I decided it was finally time to give Big Fin a proper bath. The poor toy was looking worse for wear. Its colors faded, its seams frayed. Theo was hesitant at first. He hated being apart from his favorite toy, even for a little while. But I promised him Big Fin would come out cleaner and happier. We filled the kitchen sink with warm, soapy water and gently placed the stuffed clownfish inside. Theo stood on a stool beside me, carefully scrubbing the toy with a washcloth, his little tongue sticking out in concentration. "Big Fin deserves this," he says seriously. "He's been through a lot." As we washed, Theo suddenly grew quiet. He looked down at Big Fin, then up at me. "Daddy?" "Yeah, bud?" "I'm sorry," he said. I frowned, wiping soap suds off my hands. "Sorry for what?" "For spending so much time with the Hollow Man," he replied. "I know he was mean to you. I should have told him to go away." "You don't have to be sorry, Theo," I said softly. "You didn't do anything wrong. I should have gotten us out of that house much sooner. I love you, son." Theo smiled, and just like that, the heaviness in the room lifted. We finished cleaning Big Fin, rinsing him off and wringing him out as gently as we could. Theo insisted on drying him with a towel himself. patting the toy carefully until it was only slightly damp. As I watched my son, his small hands working to make sure his toy was just right, I realized how far we'd come. The house. It all felt like a bad dream now. Something we didn't need to carry with us anymore. Life was good, and my son was safe. Hey, thank you for listening. Have a good night.